Okay, so welcome everyone to our webinar on homeschooling, or unexpectedly homeschooling. Um, I know both Anita and myself have been homeschooling. We've got about 20 years experience between us. I added up the other day. I was like, whoa, we've been doing this for a while. And
Sounds like a
so
lot.
I know for me, it does sound like a lot. I know for me that I've been getting a number of questions from people who are suddenly finding themselves with their kids at home, not really sure what they're going to do and how they're going to do it and how to set up their day so that it all works, all of that sort of stuff. And I know that you've probably been getting the same, Anita. And so that is why we thought we would put together this webinar so that we can answer all of those sorts of questions that people ask us kind of in one go, as opposed to lots of little questions here and there. And actually just have a bit of a discussion, because there's lots of things that are happening in regards to people now having their children at home with them while they're trying to work at home. So much is going on for so many families around Australia right now, around the world, but we'll focus on Australia. And so, yeah, we're just here to share and answer your questions. Yeah, so let's get rolling. Do you have anything you want to add starting off, Anita?
No, this situation is very different to our lives as homeschool
Mm.
mums, but some of the tips and tricks that we've learned incorporating homeschool into our lives, yeah, I think can be applied even in this situation.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that that's a really important point, is to recognize that there's a difference between school at home and homeschooling. And
Yeah, and
for
especially
some people, I
isolation
know
schooling.
that exactly, exactly. Because of course, even for us in homeschooling, part of my general activities is to go out and meet other homeschoolers and connect with them and have our children play together and do all of that sort of social learning, as well as just learning about wherever we're at and whatever we're doing, which now can't happen. So, there is that impact there as well from a homeschooling point of view, but also from the difference between doing school at home and homeschooling or home education, depending on which way you'd like to put it. So I can see that Rachel has started us off with a question. Awesome question, by the way, Rachel. Is there a package you guys download to know what to cover for each grade? What about you, Anita? What do you do?
I use the Charlotte Mason method, which actually happens to come with a scope and sequence um, for children per grade, but it also it is mainly a methodology and a philosophy around education. So it's not a curriculum per se. You have to find your own resources, and uh, it just gives you instructions on what kind of resources to look for and how to actually teach it. Um, and it leaves a huge amount of flexibility for combining children of different ages in one family, as well as adjusting to where your individual child is at. So we in Tasmania have never had to follow, as far back as I can remember, we've never had to follow the Australian curriculum. And so that hasn't been part of our lives. What about you, Christina?
So I did, yeah, well, a number of things. First one is I want to say that there are a whole bunch of ways of homeschooling, and every family does it differently. And every family has a way that works for them, which again is going to be slightly different for those of you who have been at school, your kids are suddenly at home, and teachers are sending home schoolwork. And from what I'm hearing from a number of people, it's actually quite a lot of schoolwork. I, for myself, have been a teacher, oh gosh, 16 years ago now. So it was quite a long time since I've been a teacher. But the difference between that and homeschooling as well is that there's a big time difference. Like I know I was looking at somebody's homeschool roster that they put together this week, and of course they're doing school at home, and every hour was dedicated to something. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's a lot of stuff. Because I know for my kids, if we knuckle down and get through our schoolwork, we can get through what we really need to do within a couple of hours. And, you know, for me, if we're doing schoolwork for longer than a couple of hours, I get bored, they get bored, and nobody's learning anything after that anyway. And so for me, in my homeschooling situation, I've really consolidated what we're learning and how much we're spending on doing things like book work versus free play. And like I just showed for those of you who were on really early, you know, the sculpture that my daughter just made with a lion. She was bored, so I gave her some clay, and she's turned it into a lion by watching a YouTube video on how to do that. And you know, she's going to probably make probably 10 more lions now until she's mastered it, and it looks really awesome. And so the way that I homeschool is slightly different to Anita's, and that is for a whole bunch of reasons, because I have a couple of businesses that I run as well as having our children at home and schooling them and doing all the things that we do. So I aim to do all of our school sit down type work early in the morning. And I have a couple of books that I use, especially because I've got high school age students. So my children range from 6 to 16 now, and there's 7 of them in between there. Anita has 8, which I'm sure she'll share with those families that are also finding, because I know that we have a number of people who have school age children and then like children that are not yet of school age. So you would be able to talk more to that right now. All of mine now are actually schooling age, so they're all in that stage of doing something. And so for me, I have selected particular workbooks. I've got for my older children, I've got like a grade 10 language book and a grade 10 maths book. That's it when it comes to textbooks and sit down work. That's what they work from. We work through our language and we work through our maths book, so that for me, I can tick that off and know that we're doing that. Other than that, we're very eclectic. So we actually pull in a whole bunch of different things to suit us. And some of which is some of what Anita does with Charlotte Mason at her place. And some of it is just like free play and figuring stuff out. Like my kids are really into cooking right now. They love watching Jamie Oliver. And, you know, my son is so into like, we're just going to put a little bit of spice in this and make it all nice. And like, he's really into that. And that's him learning culinary skills. He's learning lots and lots of stuff while he's doing that. You know, sometimes he over seasons and he's learning that he needs to cut things back, but it's all a part of the learning process. And I think I want to overlay all of this with saying, for me, the ultimate goal with homeschooling is to teach my children how to think, not what to think. So that if I can teach them how to learn all sorts of things, they're going to be set up for life. They'll be able to learn any skill that they want to learn throughout the rest of their lives, any way that they want to learn them. There's all these resources that they can use and they can implement them. So for me, the key element is teaching them how to learn, not always about what it is they're learning. Do you want to add to that?
No, I'd very much echo that, that I really want my children to love learning. And I think especially given this time, I think that that actually has to really adjust and inform how we look at homeschooling our kids right now, especially when they're coming home from normal school and things look very different and life is very different, not just school. Yeah. And I want to
add to that continue, please do.
Well, I would be moving on to a slightly different subject. So if you want to finish the thought.
Well, my thought was just the again, going back to that homeschooling versus school at home sort of idea that is happening for a number of families right now, is that when I've ever had a new homeschooler come to me and their children have been in school, my general advice is to give them a good amount of time off to actually unlearn some of the programming of school, in the sense that somebody else directing them on what to do. When you've got parents at home that are working, you need to actually help guide your children into some independent learning quite often, and utilizing a whole heap of resources to do that. Like a puzzle, for example, if they're sitting and doing a puzzle, then that is some form of independent learning that they can be utilizing to keep their brain growing and having fun. Do you want to keep adding on or continue? Tag you're it.
Oh, well, yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, as homeschool mums, I don't know about you, Christina, but I quite often get asked, how do you separate being teacher from mum? And one of the big things that I have had to learn is that mum comes first. And sorry, excuse me. And that means that school comes second. And I think especially right now, in this strange time when there's a lot of stress floating around for our kids and stress for us, and a lot of parents are educating their kids at home as well as trying to work from home. Yet being mum and being a family needs to come before school, and before official sit down textbook learning. There's I can't remember exactly what the quote was, but a beautiful quote about you know, a stressed child cannot learn. You know, there's something physical in their brain that happens where the stress chemicals actually prevent them from forming new brain connections. And we are hearing a lot of research lately about how children make the best learning connections through play, especially young children, and that once they reach overload, they just don't learn. So it's not like a bag that you can just keep stuffing stuff into until it's bulging. You can only fit so much in the cup. And if their cup is taken up with stress and worry and all the things that they're thinking about how different their life is right now, learning academic, like formal academic learning, sometimes needs to take a back seat in normal homeschool life, and especially right now in isolation schooling at home.
Yeah. And I would absolutely echo that as well, in that just from a physiological point of view, the way that our brains are set up and the way that kids' brains are set up is that they still have like their croc brain in the back of their brain, which is the thing that picks up on the environment around them. They subconsciously understand that there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of worry going around at the moment, and they pick up on that. And what that does is it signals to them internally to stay close to mom or stay close to dad, that there is danger around, like there's lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, I need to stay with mom and dad, and I need to be close with them. And their behavior is a little bit different right now because their whole routine is different right now. They don't understand the rules around why they can't go and see their friends and do all these things. They don't understand all of that. And they've got the stress on top of that, where people are expecting them to also then continue to be able to learn, and their brain just can't do the two things at once. And you're absolutely right. Like when you're stressed, you don't learn well. You learn good in a really safe, healthy environment. And that's the sort of thing that we want to be creating for our kids right now, whether they're homeschooled or schooled at home. We want to be creating a healthy, safe environment for them where they feel safe, protected, and actually then you can move into making sure that they're learning and that they're continuing their progress when it comes to study and education. And I want to bring in another element from this, that I know a lot of parents are feeling super pressured. I was talking to somebody today where their school has got, 10 different apps that they have to download, and their kids have to be on computers and on devices. And, for us, seven children, that would be completely impossible. We don't have 7 screens for each of our children to be able to get on apps and devices and all the things. And, that can be a very stressful situation in its own self, to try and force a kid to sit in front of a computer for hours on end to do schoolwork. So I want to add that when they go back to school, there will 100% be a period of revision. They will absolutely have to do some revising and make sure that the students have continued to learn or check in where everybody is at. So don't stress that your child is going to be left behind. You might actually find that if you really get into this and you really connect with your children through this process, that they might actually flourish a lot more than you have anticipated that they could. Do you want to add anything to that, Anita?
Well, I just wanted to say on topic, one of the things that I put in big capitals at the top of my notes for tonight was lower your expectations.
Yeah.
And just to expand on that, when I was a new mum and trying to follow all the sleep and feeding schedules that I thought were the right thing to do for my baby, I would get really stressed anytime my baby diverged from the schedule. And I finally realized about a year in that what was stressing me out was not my baby's needs, it was my expectations. And it was my baby not meeting my expectations. And that right now, especially in this crazy time, we need to lower our expectations and adjust our expectations and just respond to our children's needs. They come first before the schedule.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add on to that, sorry, that as their parents, you know them best, and you know where their limit is and when they've had too much input and when they're stressed and when they're not handling it well. So don't hesitate to make a decision to do something different.
Yep. And I absolutely echo that as well. The amount of times that we've pivoted on our homeschooling because it wasn't working, and there's no point continuing to try and hit yourself over the head with a book that doesn't work for you. Yeah. Move on. Shift on to something else, give something else a try. And it might be, for those families that are doing school at home, that you just go, okay, right, let's go do some PE. And the thing that I'm thinking about is, Anita, you were doing this thing a few years back at your old house where you had set up a bit of a perimeter where the kids had to do this jungle type thing. I can't even think of what it's called right now, but I'm sure you can. And I thought it was the best thing it was such a novel idea. I thought, that is super awesome. Do you want to talk about that? Do you even know what I'm talking about?
I don't even remember. No.
I remember your kids had to jump through the window and then they had to run around the backyard and then they had to go over the slide, and it was this full-on obstacle course. It was an obstacle course that you had set up, and you got your children to do that every time that you could sense that anybody's energy was getting low. Right, let's go do some obstacle course.
Yeah. Yes, I remember now. Actually, specifically if my kids were over maths, I would go, right, 3 laps of the obstacle course, and they would just bolt. I'm sure part of the novelty was they got to go out the window, not the door. I'm not really a stickler for those rules. So they would throw themselves out the window and run down the side of the house and around the entire backyard, jumping through a hoop and over some piece of play equipment that we had in the backyard, and back up the back stairs into the house, and then they'd go again. And 2 or 3 laps of that and the laughter that went with it was well and truly enough to give them a bit of a reset, to come back with a bit more courage to attack the maths again, or ditch the maths for the day and start a new subject instead.
Yeah. I love it. I thought it was such a novel idea that I was like, oh, that's so cool. Another idea that I've seen is for those people who are in Jocelyn Jones's membership, she's got all of these fantastic ideas. So if you're not in there, you totally should be. She's got all of these fantastic ideas of things that you can do with children. And one of them that she did that I thought was so amazing was actually they got out the chalk, the sidewalk chalk, and they drew an obstacle course on the sidewalk, with this chalk, and you had to do different things on different areas of it. And it was just such a great way to get people thinking outside of the box of how you can do things like PE, get your kids involved in activity, and you actually be involved in the physical activity as well, because they really love to hang out and spend time with you. And right now you're the only person that they can hang out with, so you might as well be having fun together.
Yep, very good.
So what else do you have on your list, Anita?
Okay, I have the importance of self-care.
Yep.
So, mums or dads, I don't know if there are some dads out there, but I think probably the majority are mums. Um, if this was normal life and I was talking to normal homeschooling parents, I would be talking about the importance of setting up a way for you to have time out because when your kids are with you
Yep.
all the time, you need to have some time where you aren't their main entertainment. And one of the ways that I used to do that is go to an indoor play center or a park outdoors, and I would sit and read a book or listen to an audio book with my phone or journal or something similar to that, and have a really nice coffee and a pastry maybe as well, while my kids just went nuts on the playground. You can't do that right now, but there are other things that you can do um, to give yourself a break. And it's really important that you perhaps even have a physical list of them so that when you are
Mm-hmm.
feeling run ragged or you really need to get some work done, that you can direct the kids to these other options rather than you, because you can't be there for them 24/7. You need to refill your cup so that you have some stuff to pour out to them and give back to them. And some of the things that I put down were audiobooks. Um, my children love to listen to audiobooks, and even better if they can have something to keep their hands busy at the same time, like Lego or some coloring in. Um, I got out a brand new pack of coloring in pencils, and apparently that's amazing. I knew that that would be the reaction. But you know, the pencils get stubbed and they get lost, and you don't have all the colors. And so to have a brand new pack of everything sharp and everything beautiful and all the colors there, that was a thing. And I printed
Yep.
out some brand new coloring pages that they hadn't seen yet. And they sat at the table and they watched Fantasia, which of course is set to classical music. And honestly, they'd already seen it, so they weren't really watching it. They were just paying attention to their coloring. So effectively, they were coloring to classical music, which I would say is a
Yep.
homeschool win. Um, high quality education. So anyway,
Absolutely.
that gave
Music
me a good,
appreciation.
yeah, that's right. Yep, as well as art.
Exactly.
Mm. So you'll probably notice what we just did there. We took the activity that kept our kids happy and we assigned it to some subjects that it covered, that it ticked boxes for. And you will find all homeschool mums doing this. Um, we sorted the washing together today. That's home economics, that is, colors and shapes and numbers because they were reading the sizes on the tags. It's, you know, like we will assign everything we would do with our kids um, to a learning bracket. And you can totally feel free to do that too. Um, yeah, but back to the list of self-care things. That gave me a full hour where my kids were happy and I could just sit and relax. Um, as well as that is the computer. There are lots of great websites that are educational and beautiful and interesting. It doesn't just have to be computer games. I'm sure you probably have some websites that you really like. Some of the ones that I like are where celebrities are reading picture books out loud to the children on video. Um, I know that that's a bit of a cheat. I'm okay with it. I still read picture books to my children. I still read novels out loud to my children, but I'm perfectly okay with somebody else taking a turn, especially when it's Julie Andrews. Um, also, chatting with friends, and I wanted to specify at the moment, you really need that as mum and being stuck at home. And I would highly recommend that you ring or Skype your friends, not just type on Facebook. It's not the same as hearing a voice responding to you or seeing a face um, mirroring back to you in empathy, and you really need that human contact. So get as much of it as you possibly can while still staying at home. And
Can I add to that, Anita?
yes, please do.
Can I add that our kids need that too? So
Yep.
whether it be your children get to Skype a friend, whether they get to call a friend, or whether you do what my daughter has just done to Anita's daughter and send them a letter. Like, this is
Yes.
a perfect time for our kids to actually get back into letter writing. And you know, how exciting is it as a person, like even a child, but also as an adult, to get a letter from a friend as opposed to just bills and like all the junk mail that you get in your letterbox? Why not send a letter to a friend? You know, you can buy a book of stamps and utilize them effectively and send letters to friends, which is going to cover off a number of homeschooling or subject sort of areas in the sense of literacy, you know, learning how practical life skills of how to send a letter, how to address an envelope, all of that sort of stuff. They get to do that too. So what Anita is saying in regards to looking after yourself as a mum can also be echoed through for your children as well, because they need that time too. They need some time to like look after themselves and actually collect their emotions and feel the way that they're feeling about all of this. And for you to effectively be able to give that to them, you need to give it to you first.
Yep, that's really awesome.
I'm done.
Um,
You can
the,
continue.
well, the last suggestion I had on there was make sure that you have some good coffee or whatever it is that floats your boat. Christina, I know you're not a big fan of coffee, but if
I'm a
I have
tea
a
drinker.
really excellent, I know if I have a really good quality brewed coffee, um, I just feel better about my day. It
Yep.
feels like I'm caring about me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a couple of questions that have come through, so I will ask them and we can chat upon them. Ada on Facebook is asking, my worry at the moment is how to balance work and schooling the children. So I can start answering if you'd like. So for those of you who don't know me, I am a naturopath, herbalist, GAPS practitioner, life coach, and business coach, as well as mum to seven, all of the things. And so I've had to learn to do this as best as I possibly can because, you know, prior to actually having my businesses, I was studying full time to try and get my qualifications and do all that sort of stuff. So I had to do some things that would help me get there really quickly. And that is for me, signing some bookwork so that I know that we can do this amount of pages. And if we do this amount of pages 4 days a week, because I only like to do school for 4 days a week, I don't like doing 5 days a week in regards to official schoolwork. So if we do this amount of pages for this amount of days of the week, then we'll get through the book within 200 weeks, which is approximately
200 days?
yes, 200 days. I was thinking my math is out here. But it's approximately, you know, the amount of time that you would spend at school for a year. And so that we can kind of put that out over the days evenly. If we need to catch up, we kind of know where we need to catch up and all of that sort of stuff. And so I assigned doing all of that between 10 and 12 in the day. What's not done by that time does not get done in my house because then we have lunch and then I work. So I work from like 1 through to about 5. Then we're going to have dinner. And then I'll also get back at work at 8 till about 10, depending on how long my beautiful clients keep me. Sometimes we chat until 12. It has happened. But that's approximately how my day goes. It doesn't always go like that because sometimes I don't have clients booked in the afternoon and I might be working on something different. Sometimes I have work that has to be done in the morning and then I will get my older children to hopefully help the younger children, or I'll tag team my husband in to come and do some of that work too. So you've got to find what works for you in regards to your productive hours and your children's productive hours, because I know most of my family are pretty much cactus by lunch in regards to sitting down and focusing. They don't want to do any more until like after lunch, but that doesn't mean their learning stops after lunch. It just progresses into something different. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I
Jackie is
would
saying
say
she's
that
guilty
we
of
are.
chatting at night with me.
Yep. Um, yeah, I want to add that we like getting schoolwork over and done with in the morning, and we only do 2 or 3 hours per day at the table, and that includes a break for morning tea, like recess kind of thing, where they go outside and play for 20 minutes and they come back in refreshed. Um, and that if we tried to push that any longer, we wouldn't cope. My kids just wouldn't learn
Yeah.
anything. I'd be tearing my hair out because they wouldn't be able to focus, and it's just not worth it. But also during the rest
Yeah.
of the day, um, oh, and just bearing in mind that your kids may be at school for 7 hours, but they aren't doing 7 hours of focused written work and formal academic learning. That in mixed in with that time is also the teachers, behavioral management duties with all the other students that are in the class. Their attention is divided over all the students that are there, not just the your one child. Um, Also getting from one classroom to another, um, recess and lunch, any arts or PE or music or any of those things that happen during the day as well. And those things often happen separate to our schooling, our formal um, morning bookwork time. And so that happens afterwards. And it may not look like school, but it is definitely still learning. Um,
Yeah.
and part of what we do as our learning outside of school time is things like we might watch a documentary, or the kids go and play outside. We keep a nature journal where they are supposed to make an entry each day, where they might quickly make a little watercolor drawing of something that they found, or we have an I noticed or I wondered. Um, so where they write down a question that they have, like, I wonder why kookaburras laugh, or I noticed that the butterfly was wiping its wings with its legs. Um, and we'll jot that down in their nature journal. And it's just a thing of focusing and paying attention, which is a really important aspect of science, and making observations. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's something that we really love to do, which also doesn't take a lot out of the children in terms of, focus and the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't take the same part of the brain as the formal academic sit down stuff does.
I'd like to add as well that for my children, like in regards to like finding that butterfly and seeing what it's doing and noticing what it's doing, the next step that they do in their thing is that they want to go and find out what it's called, what type of butterfly is this, what does it do, how does it do this thing, like what is its food source, all of that sort of stuff. Like this creating the space for the curiosity actually then leads on to them actually independently wanting to go and find out more information around these things.
Yes. And especially right now, and especially if you're trying to work a job at the same time as
Mm-hmm.
educate your children, letting them go on those, what we call in homeschooling terms, a deep dive, where we find something that interests us and you just deep dive into it. And, you end up using all aspects of the learning spectrum in that. You end up learning research skills, so that's also computer skills. You end up with literacy, artwork, science, all kinds of things.
Yeah. And I want to add as well, like what you're saying too, is, we do bookwork in the morning, but then in the afternoon, for example, we might do something different, where I might set my kids up with a game. Like a game of Monopoly, for example, is one of the ways that they can start to learn about money management, um, looking after their money, trying to stay out of jail. But there's a lot of things that can be learned from playing games. And one of the games that I play with my kids is actually shops. So we literally have a whole heap of play money that we have. And, we keep boxes of food that we might buy and containers and things like that. And we set up a play shop, and they have to practice like labeling how much everything's going to cost, and then doing the math and working out how much they can buy and what they can buy and how much money they need for that and how much change they need to give, all of which is like really practical learning, so that they can actually, you know, do math without actually thinking about it, with it being fun for them. So that, there's all sorts of different ways that you can do those types of things that allow it to be fun, but also still learning. And you can set them up like, once I've got my kids going on that, I don't need to be there. I can go off and do the work that I need to do. And I think I personally have had to master working in the pockets of time. So, when my kids are having a snack, then I'm actually working in that maybe 10-minute break that I get while they're having a snack or they're doing something different. Learning to work in those pockets of time is probably the biggest thing in regards to that work and school type balance that a lot of people are trying to juggle right now.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to add to that, Anita?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that when I started out on my homeschooling journey, there was a lot of fear that I wouldn't be covering the right things and doing all the right stuff, and that perhaps my kids were missing out and I might not teach them enough. And so I started going through the Australian curriculum online for each subject, and at the grade level that my children were at. And what I very quickly discovered was that the curriculum often uses concepts. Have the children understood this concept? So, for example, like in early primary school in history, what you're looking for is that they grasp the concept that life wasn't always exactly like it is now, that in other times, cars were different, people wore different clothes, times were different, people got paid differently, different amounts of money. Basically, you're just looking for a basic concept that things used to be different than they are now. Like, that is as simple as it gets. In some of those lower primary things, you're just looking for simple concepts like that. And some of those concepts are beautifully covered by reading a book together about something that happened a long time ago. Mm-hmm. Or, these things happen incidentally. These concepts are covered incidentally through your lifestyle of just being with your children, talking about things with your kids, reading books together, watching documentaries together, observing things outside. It doesn't require a textbook to tick off a lot of these concepts. And I soon realized that I didn't need to look at that curriculum anymore, because my kids were learning all these concepts just naturally as we went about our life with the methods that I was using. So, and I mean, I've changed methods since then, but I know that they're still ticking off all those concepts.
Yeah. And I love that as well. Like, I've watched your progression as a homeschooler and how you've changed over time and how you've pivoted and you've found different things that work really well for your family, all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, it is like, I like that you looked at the concepts and you then have started to apply ways of doing that. Chella, say hi and then you can say goodbye.
Hi. Hi, Chella. Bye, darling.
Beautiful distraction. That's my other thing too, is that Dad does bedtime. In our house, Dad does bedtime because I'm working. So for those of you who are doing work-life balance, Dad does bedtime in my house. It might be different in your house and it might work differently in your house, and you might have gone through a massive change and transition where both of you are working from home. Some of you, like your husband, might be working away. You might be working away and he's suddenly at home with the kids. Like, there's so much that could be changing and happening right now. The ultimate thing that I want to say to you is take a big deep breath. Let go of the stress, let go of all of that, and recognize that everybody else is in the same sort of situation in regards to lots of new things happening right now. So nobody's school at home is going to work beautifully. Nobody's homeschool is going to work beautifully the way that it maybe had previously as well. So we're all in the same sort of boat. Don't stress that your kids are going to miss out, because they're actually going to learn a whole lot of stuff that they probably wouldn't have learned, if it wasn't for this period of time. Like, I want to share a quick story in the sense that I remember for me, pregnancy has been a horrible, horrible thing. The moment that I was pregnant, I had about 2 weeks every time before my head was in a bucket for at least a good 13 weeks, and then mostly for the rest of the pregnancy as well. And so I remember, particularly with one pregnancy, being super sick and just stressing because my kids had gotten to the school age, and stressing that they weren't going to be learning enough. And I remember coming out of that fog after having the baby and then suddenly realizing that every day my kids had been in the garden, like while they were playing, been out in the garden, finding all these magnificent different types of bugs and all of the different facets that they found, all of the different creatures and crawlies that they found, the different times that they would come. And they learned all of this information about bugs that I was completely unaware of because I wasn't feeling so great. But also they were just playing. Like in my mind, they're just outside playing, they're not learning. But it wasn't until later that they were showing me, oh, this bug eats this and it does this and it does this. And it was because they had that freedom to learn and freedom to just explore and be curious and to embrace that love of learning again. So I want to say, if everything doesn't get done, don't stress, take a big deep breath. That's life. I also want to add that your house is probably not going to look the way that it normally looks while you are all at home as well. Like things get messier when you're at home. It's not like you can do a quick clean in the morning and leave the house and you come back to a nice clean house. That's not what happens when you're homeschooling and you're living at home. Every part of your house usually gets used all the time during the day. So it is a constant challenge to consistently keep it clean. But if you have members of your family that are at home, I implore you, make them do some cleaning too if they're not already.
Yeah.
Do you want to add to that,
Rachel
Anita?
Burke, Rachel Burke said that her house is cleaner.
Go you. You can totally come
well
clean
done,
my
Rachel.
house.
I missed Kathy's comment.
Yeah, so Kathy is saying, thanks for this. I'm feeling a lot more confident that my idea of keeping it simple will be enough. And I hear you on the messy house.
Yes.
Someday they will
I
go,
just want to
the house
say,
will be super clean. And you'll miss them.
So one of the things that I have realized is that I need a certain level of clean in my house to be able to function. Otherwise, my brain shuts down and starts just screaming at me, mess, 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 and that's all I can think about. And when that moment hits me, we stop what we're doing. We have a quick 10-minute tidy, and then we go back to what we were doing. We get the house tidied up about twice a day, and it doesn't have to be clean in between those times. So that just helps me to be able to function because that's one of my needs. I just need to be able to see fairly clear space in my house, and my house is very small, so it very quickly stacks up. But I wanted to return to what you were saying, Christina, about the kids playing outside with the frogs and the bugs and things. You know, that one of the philosophies in the Charlotte Mason education, and I am hearing it echoed in new research and new education philosophies. Well, they may not be new. Evidently, they're not new, but that children learn in like webs and connections and layers, and that when your children are outside making their own little dam and rivulets in the sandpit, they are learning physical and scientific concepts that one day they're going to encounter in a textbook, or they're going to encounter something that makes sense related to that, and they're going to go, I know what that means because I've seen this. I've seen the way the water flows down in the sandpit and how the water changes course if we block it off. And they're going to relate all these little natural learning incidents that happen during their play and that you don't even know they've learned until one day they hear something or see something and they just make the connection, and that it just lights up, and suddenly their brain has this massive new concept because all the little connections finally just came together.
Yeah. I fully agree with that. And, you know, just from the learning perspective point of view is that, you know, we learn on top of each other. Like building block learning, in the sense of you learn one thing and that needs to be connected to the next thing for the connection and the thought bubbles to continue to grow. And so that's exactly that. How often is it that you're trying to learn a concept? For example, when I'm working with a guy from a naturopathic point of view, quite often I'm relating his body to the car, so he can often understand the car, especially if he's a mechanical type guy. And, if I can relate that to something that he already knows, he's able to take on that concept. And the same is absolutely true for our children. When we can relate their learning to things that they already know, like in that play-based learning, it actually is much easier for them to take that on board. I want to get back to a question that came up from Angela, which is, what are the age groups? What are the ages of people's children? So mine are 6, 8. Oh gosh, this is a brain tease.
Pressure's
6,
on now.
8, 10, 12, 14, 15, 16. There we go. Your turn, Anita.
My turn. Okay. I have 13, 12, 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, and 3 months. So
Right.
I have 8.
So the second, yes, you're beating me. It's okay. It's not a competition, but you won. The other part of Angela's question is, mine is 13 and hard to motivate. So the first part of that I want to answer is, one, has your child been at school and suddenly at home? If that's the case, then, life at home and schooling at home is different to what it's like in the schoolroom. And the other thing too is, sometimes you have to find their currency. Like, what is the thing that really, that they like to do? So for example, I know my kids love to play computer games, so we might barter off some computer game time to get things done. They also love money. My children are very motivated by money. And so they have jobs in my house. My house is divided into 7 sections, and every day someone has to do a cleaning area of that section. They don't do their job, then they don't get paid, and somebody else might get paid to do their area, which they don't like, unless they really hate the job and they're okay with paying somebody else to do that area for them. But mostly they're not, because they have a affiliation with money that they quite enjoy. But there's a whole range of things that you could be using. Like, I saw this mum had this great idea where she set up a shop which had like all sorts of snack food, and to be able to have the snack food, you had to pay for the snack food, and to be able to earn the money to pay for the snack food, she had a list of different jobs that you could do that earned you a certain amount of money to be able to buy that snack food. Now, there's all sorts of different clever ways that you could do it, but the key element is finding your child's currency when it comes to that. So some children love to spend time reading books with you. So it might be, well, if you do this, I'll sit and read 2 books with you. If you do this, I can then, because, if they're actually being helpful, then it takes away some of the work that you need to be doing as well. So, find the currency for your child is what I would be saying. And I also want to say this. I am not against turning the power off in my house to get my way. I have been known to turn the power off in my house so that my kids will get up and do what I need them to do, so that they can have the power of the house back on. So, find what works for you. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Anita?
Yeah, I love that you turn the power off. That is so cool. One of the things that we have worked out is that we need to set limits about times, like that. For us, routine works really well, and it doesn't have to be an exact schedule, but knowing that in the morning we do our book work and in the afternoon we play computer games, if they've earned that time, and if they've done all the things that they're supposed to have done. As I was saying before, you've got to allow some flexibility for what your kids might need in this exceptional time. Feel free to make some exceptions. But yeah. One of the things that I would say was it, Angela, about your 13-year-old son, is that right now could be a really good time to give him some extra initiative and control over his learning. One of the things that
Oh, I love this.
we are doing at the
Share it.
moment with my what?
I'm waiting for you to share this. I love this idea that you do in your home.
Oh, right. Okay. It might be different than you thought, but um, one of the things that I do with my 13-year-old is that we have a scope and sequence that we're working through for his age of maths. And he works through an Australian curriculum maths book at his grade level and works through the sections that are on the scope and sequence. And he practices each concept until he has it. If he needs a bit more practice and he doesn't feel confident that he has grasped the concept, he will go back and do a few more problems. If he gets it and it's easy, he can skip right to the end. He can finish that concept as soon as he feels confident that he gets it. And so he right there has the control to decide for himself, and he feels good about taking that ownership and responsibility and having that control over his learning, that as soon as he gets it, he's free to go on to the next concept, and he feels that sense of accomplishment. I also wanted to say that one of the main aspects of home education is that you are not your child's only teacher. You have so many options and so many resources out there. I remember one day an old man confronted me and gave me a quadratic equation to solve right there on the spot. And I mean, maths is not even my strong point anyway, guys, but I said, I can't solve it. And he said, well, how do you expect to teach your child if you can't even solve that simple quadratic equation? And I just started to list off all the other options that I have. Well, okay, he can Skype his dad, who is an accountant and has really good math skills. He can look it up on YouTube and find all sorts of tutorials talking about all of those concepts, and keep looking at all those tutorials until he finds one that makes sense for him and he really gets it. He can look it up on the internet. He can call a friend. He can, we have a lot of resources at our disposal, and you are not the only teacher and you are not their only resource. And now is actually a really good time to be giving him some of that ownership and showing that you have confidence in him and saying, okay, well, these are the things that we need to get done. So how do you propose we do that?
Absolutely. And I want to echo that as well. This year my kids got up to, I am pretty good at maths, but it's been a really long time since I've done educated maths in regards to a school system type maths. And so my kids are now up to some of those things Pythagoras and all of that sort of stuff. And they're starting to learn some of these things, and it's a bit of a brain tease for me because it's just reminding and refreshing my memory on how to do these things. And we literally sat down together and watched some KHAN. That's how you spell it. I think it's
Khan Academy.
I don't know.
Khan?
Yes, Khan Academy. That's it. We watched some of their videos on how
fabulous.
to do that particular math problem. And, we watched it a couple of times and they loved it. And then we raced on how quickly we could all do the maths problems, together. Because, their ultimate goal is to be able to beat me. And so we were racing on doing the maths questions together. And, for me, it was actually this moment of my children suddenly understanding that maths can be super fun. Yes. And that they can actually have fun doing it, because they were really getting into, now I understand how this concept works, why we would use this concept, and how to actually work out the problems. They are actually finding that very rewarding for themselves, which, I actually really enjoyed maths at school because there was an absolute answer to it. English was the one that I didn't like because it was opinion-based answers. If you liked my opinion and you thought it matched, then maybe you would give me a good result. That was kind of my concept of it at school. But maths was my favorite because it had that ultimate 2 + 2 = 4. There's an actual solution. And so, you know, it was great fun to get back into that sort of stuff with them and refresh my own memory on some of the fun that I've had with maths, as well as actually impart to them that maths can be fun.
Yeah.
But there's all sorts of other resources like that. So, you know, there was a period of time when instead of doing book work for my kids, we did some online study where the kids did online maths and they did Squirk, which is another learning program that you can use, and they can work through different subject areas like geography and science and English and so on, for times when I really needed to focus because I had an exam coming up. But yeah, essentially what I want to say is there's loads and loads of resources, and I absolutely echo that you don't have to be your child's only teacher. And you know, you've got all sorts of different resources, especially if your kids are doing school at home. They're going to be able to plug back into their teachers. But I also want to suggest for some people that maybe they want to use this time to actually have a dabble and play to see if homeschooling is actually a option that they would enjoy for their family. Not that it's something that everybody loves to do, but you know, it might be something that you enjoy. And Jackie is saying over in Facebook land that she loves maths. Maths is cool. I like it too. I did my year 10 maths in my grade 9 school holidays.
We'll have to agree to disagree.
I was, well, yes. That's okay. You're much better at languages than I am.
I love the languages. I love English.
Well, the other thing too is like foreign languages. So my children and I have been learning different languages using programs that are free on the phone, like Memrise, for example, is an app that you can download. And for anybody who knows German, Muchen bitte ein Glas Wein. That's the only sentence I can say in German, but I do really want some wine, please. Anita, on the other hand, is like, I know, dude, it sounded great. Jackie is saying that she's using this as a time to trial homeschool, which is super awesome.
Yeah,
I think you would
cool.
rock at it.
Yep.
But you're a French lass, and you teach your kids French, and my children are jealous that I'm not teaching them French, but that's okay. Your children end up teaching my children French.
Oh, that's cool. Well, your children can teach mine German. Yeah, I studied French at high school, college, and university, and spent 6 weeks on a student exchange there. So I am enjoying passing French on to my children. And the beautiful thing about homeschooling or doing school at home is that you can use this time to share with your children some of your own personal passions, because there's no better teacher for any subject than one who loves what they're teaching. And yeah, it really lights it up for them.
I fully agree with that.
Haley is asking
I want to go back
tips.
to Angela's.
Sorry, sure.
Well, there's 2 questions that are fairly similar. So Angela is asking, no, it's Rachel. Rachel is asking, how do you homeschool with non-schooled age children around, e.g. a crazy toddler? And I think that that's fairly similar to what Haley is asking. And I'd love some tips on keeping smaller children busy while trying to teach. Do you want to start?
Sure.
Okay, go.
So I have I have 2 and 4-year-old boys, and let me just say that before this boy, I didn't understand the term tornado. I get it now. He does crazy things that don't make sense. Like, he throws hammers at people. I mean, not all the time, but you know, like, he does things that just don't make sense. Let's just leave it at that. He is not a violent boy. He's the sweetest little thing there is. But he just does things that don't make sense and gets into crazy kinds of mischief. So anyway, I'm sure you understand what it's like. So the way that I manage that is that I know that I have a very limited amount of time before the littles will need me again. So I make the most of that by pulling out activities or games or things that they really like doing only at bookwork time. So, for instance, we never get Play-Doh out except in bookwork time. They get to play with Lego up at the table while the kids are doing bookwork. They get to draw up at the table like the big kids. They get to draw on the chalkboard, and honestly, if it gets too crazy, I will just leave the big kids doing whatever they're doing, and I will go and read to the little boys or play a game with them. And the more crazy and active the game is, the better, to burn those wriggles out, to burn off the energy and get those wriggles out. But one main thing that I have really found is, and I hear this echoed from a lot of veteran homeschoolers, is that you need to look after the littles first. So in the early part of the day, before you are ready to sit down and do bookwork with your bigger kids, you need to try and fill up the little ones' love tanks. So for me, that looks like giving them a big snuggle and kiss in the morning when they get up, and reading some books with just those two before we even start bookwork. And then we do all those things during bookwork that I mentioned about to keep them occupied. And when they're really getting to the end of their tether, I send them outside. They are fine playing outside together the vast majority of the time for a limited time. And they will play together out in the dirt pile and get completely filthy and need a full change of clothes when they come back in. But if we got the bookwork done, that's totally fine. Or I will give them a snack. Snacks work really well. And especially if it's a snack with lots of little pieces and they are occupied with picking up them, hundreds of different pieces of the snack. Or if they get to help make the snack, like spreading peanut butter on celery and putting little sultanas in as the people on the celery boat. There are all these very simple little activities that you can get them involved in. And, basic principles for keeping little ones happy apply here as well. Make sure that they're fed, make sure that they have plenty of room to run their energy off, and make sure that they get a little bit of attention too.
Yep. So some of the things that we used to do in our house is that I would have a box I would have 4 boxes and they would rotate. So they would be toys that were only used during the period of time in the morning while we're trying to get schoolwork done. And we'd set everybody up and then we would sing, "What's in the box today? Wonder what it could be. What's in the box today? Let's look and see." And then they'd rush to the box and they'd open the box and it would be toys that I had, put away, and they'd only get that set of toys for that week, and then we'd put the box away and then we'd get another box out the next week, so that there was a constant rotation of toys, and they were constantly getting things that were new because they'd been away for a month, and that would keep them really entertained as well, exploring things that they hadn't seen. It also helped with actually not having toys everywhere. The toys belonged in the box, and those boxes only came out during that period of time while we were trying to get a bit of schoolwork done. And there were their everyday toys that they had, but these were toys that only came out at this particular time. So that was something that we've done. We've also done play school. I would put maybe play school on for them to watch at that period of time if I was really trying to get a concept into my big kids, when they, sometimes you need an extended amount of time to really hone in on actually practicing and teaching that particular thing. Colouring in. So for example, my little kids have always had colouring in books where they could sit next to the older children while they were doing their schoolwork, so that they felt like they were part of the tribe and they were doing their schoolwork. Their schoolwork was very important, and it was colouring in, and which is actually absolutely a legitimate form of schoolwork, because they're learning how to navigate the pencil. They're learning all those fine motor skills, and it actually does help to set them up for when they get to the point of starting to write. Anything else you want to add?
I was just thinking that sometimes we get out the Scrabble letters for my 4-year-old, and he likes to pull out the letters that he knows, like D for Daddy, and all the letters that his siblings' names start with. And he likes to ask me which letters make his name. And, you know, he can play with those letters, and he can write some of them on the chalkboard. And that's just, you know, that's just for play. Like, I don't push that. Before the age of 6 or 7, I don't require any formal learning from them. But if they want to do it, then I let them join in. And they often do want to. And so that's one of the things that we'll do. Another thing is that we have a jar of beans, just red kidney beans, dry red kidney beans, that we use for counting and simple maths concepts, and like when we're adding or learning multiplication. So, you know, groups of 3, and, you know, the beginning learner, you know, 6 or 7 years of age, can physically see and understand the concept. And sometimes the little boys like to get those out and play with those as well, which always means that we end up with less beans in the jar than we had before. But we can always refill the jar with more kidney beans, and it's not a big deal. Another thing that we have done in the past is having a drawer full of slightly damp sand. And I know that sounds crazy, like just a wooden drawer in the lounge room, and just a good like couple of inches deep with damp sand, and just sprinkle a bit more water in if it was getting a bit dry, and they can draw and write their, you know, the initials of their name in that, and that keeps them occupied as well.
Yeah. I think something that we're both echoing a little bit is having specific things that they can do that is really only available for that period of time. It's like anything. If they were able to do all of those things all the time, the novelty of being able to use them at that particular time, that keeps them entertained, and keeps them, you know, whether it be learning actively or subconsciously, that wears off and they don't want to do it. So it's like, keep some things that are away and bring them only out at those moments in time, so that they stay special, that they stay novel, and they stay exciting enough for them to want to engage with.
Yeah. And I think on top of that, and related to that, to just reiterate that you are mum first and teacher after that. So, you know, if your little ones are going nuts for some reason and you just need to go and look after them and sort them out, then take a break. Don't force yourself to keep going. You know, you can only do so much, and if it's not working, there's no point in thrashing a dead horse. You're not going to get stuff done. You're not going to learn stuff. You're just going to end up yelling at the kids, and then you'll feel bad about it later, and you'll have to go and apologize to them, which is good, because that's setting a good example of, you know, sorting out your problems, and when you make a mistake, going and cleaning that mess up with the people that you hurt. But we'd all prefer if we just didn't lose our cool. And yeah, your mum first, not teacher first.
Yeah. So we have a question that came through anonymously that I want to actually ask as well is, what do I do when I feel totally overwhelmed by homeschooling, as well as struggling to come to terms with all the changes in our home and families, the economic impact, the social impact, family overseas, etc.? How to homeschool active, extroverted teen boys, and which are not always interested in schooling. So there's a couple of questions there. The first one, what do I do when I'm feeling overwhelmed with homeschooling? Some of that we've talked about in regards to that self-care and looking after yourself. But is there anything else that you want to add to that?
I would just say that when you're in a place of feeling like that, that is not the time to try and sit down and plow through the list. It's only going to end in disaster. And I know sometimes when things are not going well, you might feel like you have to tick all the boxes to try and make yourself feel better. But actually, it's really counterproductive. And I would say the most important thing right then is to take a break and ask yourself, what do I need right now? What are my needs? what are my kids' needs, and work from there.
Yeah. Something I want to add to that is don't forget you don't always have to be inside, especially with teenage boys. You know, if things are not working, things are not happening, everyone's a little bit funny, they're emotionally not coping so well, get outside and use that time to dig a garden. Go outside, and like now's the perfect time to be teaching your children how to garden and the importance of gardening and, you know, food things. And if you don't have a backyard where you can just get them, you know, for my boys, with a shovel and stuff like that, if you don't have a garden where you can do that, then maybe go and go to a trip to Bunnings and actually grab a whole heap of, you know, potting mix and dirt or some manure that's on the side of the road, collect that, bring that home, use milk cartons, whatever it is that you can, to start growing something, so that they've got something to focus on every day as a bit of a routine. Go and water the plants, make sure that they're looked after, but also some physical actual activity, because remember, we're designed for movement, not stagnation. And as we sit all day, we don't get that we don't get that movement in. And when you're stuck in the swirly swirls of all the stuff that's happening that's out of our control right now, it can be really challenging to get yourself out of that when you're stagnant. And so sometimes getting out, maybe going for a walk, taking the dog for a walk, doing whatever, going outside, playing football, kicking a ball, doing whatever it is that you can to get some actual movement taking place. That's going to help you shift out of the swirly swirls of the anxiety, the stress and the worry, and feeling completely overwhelmed. And remember, they learn stuff during those moments as well. Like, it's not just what you can learn from a book that's important. Learning how to feed yourself is a vital skill. And so teaching them how to do things like gardening is a fabulous thing that you could be doing with your children, and they can learn so much from that. From, you know, you can count that as science, especially as you start to look at, you know, how plants germinate and what sort of conditions you need to make for them. Like, you can do some balancing your soil, all of that sort of stuff. There's so much that you could be learning during that period of time. And it doesn't all have to come from a book. It can come from engaging with each other and doing something that's important for you, all of that. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to add that even though we are maintaining physical distancing, it does not mean you can't go outside. So I think it's really important at this time to not just think of all the list of things that we can't do, but what can you do? You know, what can your active teenage boys do right now to burn some energy? And they are still allowed to go ride bikes, and they can burn some, you know, steam off riding bikes. They're still allowed to go for a run outside on the street, as long as they are just with members of their own household and they are, you know, headed back home after that. They're not just wandering around socializing with friends they've met on the street. You are allowed to go fishing still. You're allowed to.
You're not allowed to go fishing now.
Oh, when
unless you've
happen?
got your own pond, like yesterday.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
But, you know, look into what you can do and do it, you know, like, I know boys seem to have this special physical need to really stretch and strain their muscles. And if that means lifting heavy things, pushing heavy things, swinging an axe and and splitting wood, if they're old enough and you've taught them that skill, that would be a really good use of their energy that they need to use up before they can actually be physically ready to sit still for some of those concepts that you're wanting them to learn and some of that schoolwork that you're wanting them to get done.
Yeah. So I've gone through all the questions that I have. If you have any others that you would like to pop in, now would be the perfect time to pop them in, whether it be over on Facebook land or whether it be in the actual webinar thing here. We're happy to answer any of the questions that you actually have. Yeah. Anything on your list, Anita?
I think I've covered most of the things that I wanted to say, except to just add on the topic of audiobooks and conversations and things like that being a way to learn, that you can also cover a huge amount of learning in having your children do something. It could be something of their choice to show you what they've learned about the book that they just read. And you don't have to phrase it that way. You can say, hey, do you want to do a painting about this book that we just read? Or sometimes my children, it pays to give them an either or option, not a yes or no option. And so I would probably say, would you like to put on a play, or would you like to do a drawing about what we just read? And that can be a really good way of them concreting what they've learned and presenting it back to you, which is a really effective way of locking in the memory of what they've learned.
Yeah. Heather is asking, are there any Tassie online homeschool groups? Absolutely. I know of 3 of them. I run 2 of them. So there are heaps that are there. If you just put in things like Tassie, homeschool, and don't forget the other term for homeschooling is home education. So make sure if you're looking for groups that you use whatever location that you're in. So there is a Hobart or there is a Southern home education group. So make sure you either use homeschooling or interchangeably home education. To find some of those groups, and there's heaps out there. There's lots of people that you can plug into, and if you are considering, if you're staring down the barrel of what your school is presenting for you to do and thinking that that's going to be an overwhelming task, I would actually maybe consider having a look at what the homeschooling sort of stuff is available actually in your area, because you might find that that might be a little bit easier than actually trying to do the school at home. From what I've seen of some of the things that have come through, there is no way that I would want to do that with my children. It would frankly drive me bananas with all, especially trying to do that with all 7 of my children. It would be far too complex. There are things that I can do with my children where we group batch. So I've got older children and I've got younger children. So I will do things with my older children and we'll work through something together. So for example, one of the books that we read last year was When the War Began. And it was one of my favorite books when I was a teen. So I was really excited to read it with them. And we just took turns reading it around the table and talking about it, talking about what we thought. And that was, linguistic practicing. They were learning language skills. They were learning to listen. They were learning to put together stories. There was lots of language learning in that moment of us sharing a book together, along with the relationship building of that, of being able to talk about what was our favorite thing in the chapter and what do we think is going to happen next and all of that sort of stuff. But the same token is with my younger children. So I've got high school and primary children. So my primary children will get, some different books out. We might get some poetry books in regards to some nursery rhymes and be listening and learning to those sorts of things together. We might read a book that is about the Tasmanian history, but told from a child's perspective, that then allows them to kind of understand what it might have been like to be a child in the period of time that they're reading about, which is language as well as history and geography and connecting all of those things together. And I can do that with those 2 groups. And I just ask more challenging questions for my older children and less challenging questions for my younger children, but we base it on the same activity. And if I was to do the school at home stuff that I'm seeing come through for some people, no, there would be no way that I would be able to manage that effectively and work and do all the other things that I need to do with all my children. It just wouldn't happen that way. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Anita?
Yeah, I would have to echo that. We do that as well, that we do activities together. And at the moment in my officially school age children, I have 5. And so we are doing, I've got the oldest 2 together and the youngest 3 together, but there are still things that we do all together, like we will listen to a song on YouTube by our composer for that term, our classical composer for that term. We'll all listen to that together. We won't even discuss it. We'll just give it our focused attention while we're listening. If the kids want to talk about it afterwards, that's fine. They can do that, but there's nothing else required. We do the same artist study together. We have a different artist each term. We do all of that together. We do our exercise together. We do our own personal artwork together. We listen to the same history book and read the same novels together but each of those children are taking different things out of what is being read, because of the level that they're at. And so they are taking age appropriate understanding and learning and concepts from the same book without me having to do the work 5 times over. And there is no way that I would be able to do that. Yeah, like you said, Christina, that I just, we wouldn't be able to do that. And
Yeah.
so we group together the things that we can and do it together, and they just all learn at different levels, and they produce work of different levels, and that's exactly as it should be.
Yeah. It's the same with documentaries. Like my kids and I will sit down and we'll watch a documentary, and you know, my younger children might just verbally tell me what they've learnt, whereas my older children, I might ask them to quickly just write an essay on that, as if they were writing it for a particular thing. So I might say, write an essay on that as if you were writing it for a blog post, write an essay on that as if you were writing it for a newspaper, write an essay on that as if you were writing it for, like, you know, teen magazine type thing. So that they've got different sort of ways that they would write compared to, you know, those things. But we've all sat down, we've watched the same documentary, we've talked about it, we've got different ideas and then different outcomes of work that would come with that.
Yeah.
A question that Ruby has, which I think is a really interesting one, is have you ever tried to put homeschooled children back into the school system? What are your thoughts? I never have. I think my children would be super bored. I think that my children would find school super boring, other than the social activity of being connected with friends and so on. It just wouldn't be mentally stimulating for them in the way that they're used to. And I think that they would be really, really bored. What about you, Anita? I know kids that have done it and they've done it fine.
Yeah. I haven't, but we've always worked on the aim that to have our kids roughly at grade level kind of skills, so that if we did need to transition them into school for some reason, they would be able to slide in fairly easily. But yeah, it's not like you've cut all ties to the universe, and then you have to kind of rebuild this entire thing. Like, you can always try it out for a little while and then make a different decision, and it's not going to be an issue. I've also always felt that the way that my children learn, and the fact that they know really well how to learn and they love learning, which is one of our main aims of homeschooling, has probably set them in pretty good stead in whatever area and environment they are learning.
Yeah. And I agree. Like we, for example, I know when we were living in Launceston, Scotch Oakburn had some science stuff that they had there. Like I think it was their double helix science program that they had there. And my kids went along to that, and they, you know, actually, it was funny because I didn't even know that they had learnt all this stuff about fish. They were just reading it on their own. And so, you know, I went and sat in on the class with them, and they had to dissect this fish, and they're pointing out all of these different parts and they're answering all of the questions. I had to sit there and tell my kids, shh, don't answer all the questions. Let somebody else have a turn answering the questions. But it was, you know, out of their own interest, they had gone and learnt all about, you know, that fish have this special bladder that fills up with air and it puffs up, like helps them maneuver in the water and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, wow, I totally did not teach them that. They learnt that on their own just because they were interested, and they went down the rabbit hole of following up on fish. Probably because we'd been fishing like for the first time and they'd caught a bunch of flathead, and then they wanted to know everything there was to know about flathead. So it just is the way of life. There are opportunities. I know that the next question that she has is, have you ever done any combination of homeschooling and going to public school? What are your thoughts on this? There is now in Tasmania, I know that they changed the Educational Act in particular to be able to allow that to happen more fluently in regards to homeschool kids being able to access particular things from school. You have to, like, to be considered homeschool, there's a certain percentage that has to be homeschool, and then you can use the rest of that percentage in a school if you want to. But that would be something that you'd want to, in Tasmania, connect with the Officer of Education Registrar for them to actually be able to talk you through that. And that's where you would just contact the home education department in your area, wherever you are, whether you're Tasmania or somewhere else, to see what available options are open there. For me, I've never done it because I would think that would be such a huge hassle. Yeah, for a huge hassle in the sense of like it would take so much time to drive kids to school and back, and you know, especially if half my family were doing that and the other half weren't doing it. I know for me, 6 years ago I was on life support, and afterwards I had, we were still homeschooling through that whole experience, and beautiful Anita and other friends came and taught my children some things while I was on life support and so on. And people ask me, I don't know how you coped with all your kids at home. And I'm like, I would not have coped if all my kids were at school, because I just did not have the energy to be able to pack them lunch boxes, wash and iron and do whatever else with their school clothes, make sure that their bags are packed and they had all the things. Like, that would have been so much more energy for me than actually what I did was I laid in bed, my kids brought their schoolwork to me, I was able to help them do their schoolwork, and then I was able to recuperate from that experience. So for me, it seems way too much of a hassle to drive them to school for some things and not for others. But I know other families who do it. So, and remember, I have 7 kids. So if I'm playing with that with 7 kids, it's a much bigger deal than if I've just got 1 or I've got 2. What about you, Anita? Any comments?
Yeah, I have, I often get the comment, I have no idea how you homeschool. I don't know how you can do it. And I will respond, I don't know how you get lunches packed and get them to school on time with shoes on. Honestly, shoes. Where do they go every morning? I don't know. Like, we try and go out, nobody has shoes. Or, we got to the supermarket the other day. Not the other day, this was weeks ago, before all the social distancing stuff. And one of my children did not have shoes. Like, how does that happen? Having to deal with that every day would be a bit of a nightmare. No, look, everybody's lives are different, and you just find what works for you and your family, and you find ways of making it easier, and you find ways of making it more efficient for you and your family, and whatever works for you is great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you've just got to have a lot of flexibility, especially at the moment, and just find ways that make things work for you.
Exactly. And, again, I've had people say that thing to me. I don't know how you do it. And I'm like, I don't know how you do it. Like, for me, I tip my hat off to you, because there's so much for me that I see extra that you do that I don't have to do in regards to sending kids to school. Like, I don't have to pack lunch boxes. I just heat up the soup that I cooked the day before. We don't even have to wear clothes. We can do it in our pajamas. And we totally do sometimes. We don't have to get up at a particular time. Like, our kids are able to like, for me, my kids wake up when they're ready to wake up. Your kids do it much earlier than my kids, but my kids are generally later sleepers, which means that I've got more time in the morning to just do a few things before they actually get up and are ready to get rolling. Different in your house. You've got early risers, but yours go to bed early too.
Yeah, and I'm an early riser, and I turn into a pumpkin at like 9:30, so I wouldn't cope with that.
She's such a Cinderella.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, but no, it works for us that the kids are early risers, and probably because I am, and that works for us. So, that's the thing. Like, you and I are besties and have been homeschooling our kids together for years, and yet, we do things totally differently, and it works for us.
Yep.
So
I love that Rachel
Ruby,
is saying that's why my house is cleaner now.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're at home. You have more time for cleaning your house.
Yeah, and you're not rushing around.
You're not having to play taxi.
And there's no after school activities and stuff too.
Yeah.
Yes, Ruby, what are your plans for higher education? Do you want to start off?
Well, for us, we are just starting high school. Well, yeah, kind of. We're in grade 7 for our oldest, and that just involves keeping our options open with a lot of different subjects, which we were already doing anyway, and keeping an eye out for things that he has extra interest in. I asked him to go and dig water lilies out of our pond because it was clogged up with water lilies and it needed to be thinned out. And he said to me, "Hey, Mum, do you reckon we could sell these on Facebook Marketplace? Do you reckon anybody would buy them?" And so we put the listing up, and he has made, at last count, over $500 selling these water lilies that we were just going to dump on the compost pile because they were clogging the pond. And that was his idea. He's been managing the contact between the people who wanted to buy them and himself, giving them instructions on how to plant them, dealing with the customers as they come to our house to collect them, taking the money, doing all the money stuff that comes with that, of adding up how much he's got, how much he wants to put in his savings account, how much he wants to spend on different things. And, you know, that has been ticking all sorts of boxes in terms of being entrepreneurial and, you know, dealing with money and dealing with customers. And so that has been just one more aspect of preparing for job readiness. And
Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. We're keeping our options open and wide, and leaving room for when an interest for them to.
Yeah. I think you froze there for a second, Anita, but that's yeah. So from my point of view, in regards to that job readiness, like my kids have come along when I've done workshops, and they've been the person that's taken the money and sorted all the things out. And, you know, while I'm talking with clients, they're actually serving people, you know, they're facilitating the buying and the selling of things at my workshop. So there's lots of opportunity for children to learn skills that help them when it comes to job readiness. When it comes to higher education, for us, Sophie, for example, is 16 right now. She wanted to, we have selected for this to be another year of grade 10 for her. So she technically falls under technically falls under the age limit where she should possibly be going into grade 11, but we get the choice. We actually get to say, well, actually, no, we're going to do grade 10 again and focus on a couple of things that she really wants to focus on. She also has been given the choice if she wants to go off to college or if she wants to go into some sort of other level of higher education. She would really like to do a TAFE course in photography because she's loving photography. And she's got a camera this year and all of that sort of stuff. So, you know, she has the freedom and opportunity to do that. The course that she's planning to enroll in is in New South Wales, and it's an online course. So she doesn't have to go anywhere to be able to do it. She can access it online. We could continue to do year 11 and 12 at home. That's not a problem. And when it comes to university, again, it's not a problem. Like, you can get into any university course ever. There is always a back door to get into any university course, even when it comes to medicine. You know, if one of my kids wanted to do medicine and they considered an exam that would allow them to get a score in order to try and get into medicine, or they could do 1 year of general studies at university, picking subjects that are specifically important for medicine, like the sciences. And as long as they did well on those, they could absolutely defer into medicine the following year. So I want to say, for any of those parents who are concerned about their children not getting a high grade score or any of those sorts of things in regards to this year being a schmozzle with their child's education, remember, you can get into any course you ever want to get into any university just by finding some of the back doors to be able to do that. There's lots and lots of opportunity to do that. I used to work in a university and help people be able to do that. There's loads and loads of opportunity, and it doesn't have to look the way that you've been told that it has to look. It can look any way you like it to look. And there's, oodles of opportunity. Like, for example, if they can't get into the course that they want to get into, they can go work for a year, and then of course they can, jump back into university with a little bit of life experience behind them and actually some drive with the course that they want to be doing. That's what I want to say on that. So the next part of Ruby's question. You go.
Um, that I've forgotten.
University, backdoors, scoring,
Yeah,
higher
so
education.
homeschooling actually provides a lot of flexibility because you aren't at school, um, a required number and specific hours of the day. You actually have a lot of flexibility. So you can you could get your children into a like work experience situations that wouldn't be possible for most high school students, where they could be effectively having a mentorship that wouldn't be possible for high school students, um, because they would be required to be at school during those hours. And yeah, like there's extra flexibility and actual bonuses that come from that flexibility. It isn't necessarily at all a a, a disadvantage.
Yeah. And one of the selling points for my kids that are now, of work age where they can go get a job is that they can actually work during school hours where other people can't work, which, is a bonus for some employers because, of course, they're a cheaper rate and they can do it during school hours. And of course, my kids could then go do their schoolwork after they've knocked off and do it in the evening or whatever. There is that absolute flexibility for all of those sorts of things to take place. And actually, employers do tend to look favorably on homeschooled, home educated children in the workforce. The other part of Ruby's question is, do you think there are any personality traits that you need to be a successful homeschooler? I want to jump in and answer this straight away, if that's all right with you, Anita.
Go for it.
My answer to this is the only personality trait that you need to have to be able to be a successful homeschooler is to get to know yourself and how your family works, because everybody has a different personality style. They have different personality traits. They have different families that are made up in all sorts of different ways, and the key element is to always know what's going to work best for your family. So Anita and I have said we prefer to do schoolwork in the morning and then other stuff in the afternoon. Other families prefer to do their schoolwork in the afternoon and have the morning for free play and for reading and doing whatever else they want to do. It's all about what's going to work best for you and your family. So there's been periods of time where different things worked best for me and my family. Like, when all my children were really little, we did, the same sort of curriculum together, just different levels. Then as they started to grow, I needed to study. We switched it up a little bit and we changed it. What we do today looks nothing like what it was when we first started. It changes and is ever growing and ever evolving. And the key element is you knowing you and your family and what's going to work well for them. Tag, you're it.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with that. I couldn't count how many times somebody has said to me, "Oh, I don't have the patience to homeschool. You must have the patience of a saint." And no, I don't. um, I have grown in patience, I can say that for sure. But patience is not the reason I decided to homeschool. Um, my inability to get riled is not the reason I chose to homeschool. um, we felt that it was the best decision for our family, and that was why we chose to homeschool. It had nothing to do with personality traits or, my ability to remain patient even after I've, asked the same question or been asked the same question 10 times in a row. Um, you just figure out what works for your family and you move on.
Yep. Yep. Uh, and the same, for us, we of course made the decision to homeschool for a whole bunch of different reasons. One of which was I was a teacher at the time and I didn't want to spend my best hours of the day looking after other people's children while my children gave their best hours a day to somebody else. And then we all got home and were cranky at the end of the day and were not loving and kind and generous to each other because we were tired. So that was one of the reasons we, of course, decided to homeschool, along with a multitude of others. Like, you usually decide these sorts of life-changing or altering things for one reason, but then as you go along, you collect a whole bunch more about why that works really well for you. And so I didn't start thinking that I would be the perfect person for homeschooling. Oh my gosh, it's so not. But I'm very decisive, and that works really well for me. Anita is very caring and loving and generous, and that works really well for her. Sometimes I embrace my inner Anita, and I, be a bit more gentle and kind and caring and slower. And sometimes I'm sure she embraces her inner Christina. Please say yes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So yes, Ben and Kerry are saying they have one of those water lilies
Oh, excellent.
from your son. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So
Yep.
again,
So
any
I,
other questions that people want to know while we've got about another 15 minutes, I'm sure we can hang around for. So if you have any other questions that you want us to answer, pop those in now so that we can get them answered for you.
yep. I
Do you
just
want to
want to
continue what
say
you're saying?
back to, yeah, that homeschooling as it stands right now, I think if you haven't chosen this for yourselves, just really give yourselves a lot of love and a lot of grace and let yourselves have fun in the ways that you can find available to you right now and enjoy your kids. Um, and when they drive you crazy, look after yourself and uh, find something else that works better. And yeah, don't feel that you and your family have to be a slave to the schedule that gets sent home. You can only do what you can do, and everybody is under extra pressure right now. So I
Yeah,
think you just need to be extra gracious with everybody, including
yeah,
yourself, especially yourself.
exactly. And I
No
want to
room
give
for
you a
mum
little bit
guilt.
of fun stuff that you can. Yeah, no, throw away the mum guilt. You can't do everything, especially like at a moment's notice. This hasn't happened like you've had, 3 years to mull over the decision about whether you're going to send your kids to school or not. And it's automatically like it's just happened overnight for many people. And so, you wouldn't expect yourself to be able to pick up a trade overnight. So don't expect yourself to be able to homeschool your children effectively overnight either. It takes time, it takes patience, and it takes a commitment to growth and being kind to everyone and generous to everyone, because everyone is in a new situation now, including your children. So just be loving and kind to each other. And if what you need to do is sit down and watch a family feel good movie, do that. You can turn that into schoolwork too by asking them to, do a little report on it. Um, sorry, my children are starting to get a little bit noisy now. They should be in bed, but they're not. The other thing that I want to say is that right now in our backyard, we have our two swags set up. We have a little campfire thing set up as well. So, there are all sorts of things that you could be doing that maybe are outside of your box of thinking. If you've got a tent, go set it up so that you've got another space outside where people can hang out and play and get away from each other a little bit, especially if you're not used to spending so much time together right now. But think outside of the box. Have a pretend camping trip in your own backyard. You don't have to go to a camping site, which you actually can't go to right now, to actually have that sort of fun. You can do it in your own backyard. There's all sorts of other things that you could be doing in your own backyard or front yard for that matter, that could be fun and connecting. Like, use this time to really connect and plug back into each other. Get out the board games, get out the card games, get out the conversation cards and start talking to each other. Get out some books that you could be reading together as a family or as groups of families. If my older children and my younger children enjoy different things. Yeah, spend some time just loving and caring each other for this time as well. If it doesn't work that day, give up, move on.
Yep.
Add anything?
Just that I have no problem with if I get up and I feel crappy and I haven't slept well and I just feel like I just can't handle school that day. I have no problem with cancelling school and doing a movie or poetry and hot chocolate in our pajamas, or just going outside and wandering around in my garden while the kids just have free play and they come up with all sorts of crazy things. They make bike jumps out of the weirdest things and like often stack themselves. Um, but like that's
Learning,
life. It's
learning
really
risk
good for them.
management.
their learning risk assessment, exactly. We'll tick that one off on the homeschool on the homeschool curriculum, on their well-being.
Yeah.
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 No, just
And so
yeah.
I want to add for those people who are thinking of maybe utilizing this time to play homeschool and see how that works for them and what things are like, you might want to start with a curriculum just to get you going. You might want to get a couple of books out, like Kmart, for example. They have all of those little learning books that you can get. My kids always start on those books. Like, I always start my little early learners on those sorts of books because they're fun. They're already put together. The kids love doing them. You know, have a think about, what sorts of things that are already available for you to be able to use. Ben or Kerry is asking, what are your strategies for encouraging children to focus in an always changing environment, i.e. a farm? I think that's a perfect environment to learn a lot in.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that, Anita? Because you've got one more than me.
Yes. I think for me, we have seasons. And there are some seasons where we need to just focus on what is happening at our farm. When the blueberries are in season, I give my kids extra time to just go and pick blueberries, and we might do less bookwork. During the winter, when there's not as much to do, we might get them to do extra bookwork or read extra books. I try not to add extra bookwork, but we might do more days in the week on bookwork than we would during the times that we're busy. But I also try and keep our learning to short slots of time that are assigned to specific subjects. And when we get to the end of that slot of time, it doesn't matter if we haven't finished our work, we move on. We cannot just keep going forever. Again, flogging a dead horse. It's not good for anybody. And once they've reached their limit, they've reached their limit, and we just move on and we pick up where we left off the next day. And so I think that would be one of my main things, is work in short slots of time, move on when it's done. And if you need to adjust because there are other things that need doing, like the house needs cleaning, or you need to fill up the snack box, or make some biscuits or bread or whatever you need to do, then just do it. And it's still learning. It's still wonderful learning. And you're constantly learning. If you're breathing, you're learning. You may not be learning in the formal academic education model that we are all familiar with, because that's the way that we learned, but you are absolutely learning, and you're always learning new concepts and new skills, and that's good because your brain is growing and developing new connections, which makes more room for more learning. So it's all good.
Yeah. I want to add too that I think that there's so much that can be learned from that, like from a natural environment like a farm like that, in the sense of, I was talking to one of my friends and saying, maths, for example, if you want to do some practical learning on maths, look at a recipe, and if the recipe is asking for half a cup, give your child purposely a fourth of a cup, so that they have to figure out, well, how many of fourths do I need to make a half a cup? They're learning fractions while they're doing that. So you can sort of weave schoolwork in amongst that, in the sense of learning to read the land, learning to read like the environment that you're in, learning to talk about the microbiome of the soil and those sorts of things, and how important that is to be able to grow really healthy food and really healthy plants that are able to resist bug damage and all of that sort of stuff. So you can weave that all in. And I want to add too that for my family, we don't always follow the terms. Like, I don't even know when school terms are on, because like we just don't follow them. We work when we want to work. Like over the Christmas holidays, New Year, we did schoolwork every day while we were away at my sister's shack. We did schoolwork every day while we were away, because it was much easier than trying to do it at home during that last little window of time in our life where things were finishing off for the year. And so, we've taken a break while other people have gone back to school. It doesn't have to be that way when you're not within the system. So for those people who are schooling at home, that's going to be different. But if you are actively using this time to like actually engage in homeschool, and connect with your registrating body and do that from a, you know, legal point of view, you get to choose when your terms are and when you take breaks and when you don't take breaks. And I know for a lot of homeschoolers that some of them don't do the Christmas holiday type break because they find their kids are getting too bored. So, and the rhythm of actually doing schoolwork works for them. Yeah, so Rachel is saying as well, our kids are making a piñata, which we are going to put up for put Easter eggs in, and camping for Easter in the backyard because we can't go away, of course. We have 5 pits set up and they think it's awesome. Cooking Easter buns and homemade Easter eggs, all these things that we wouldn't have had time for. And it's great to have fun together as a family. And I want to say, hallelujah, that is awesome. Well done for thinking outside of the box, Rachel, and actually stepping into that space. And that's exactly what homeschool is. Homeschool is taking, you know, being able to think outside of the box and do things a little bit differently and, you know, play with a whole bunch of things that work not just for educational purposes, but also work for your family. Like one of the things that's jumping out to me right now in regards to an activity that some people could be doing is actually hatching some chicks. You know, people are wanting food security right now. You can order fertilized eggs online. And you could practice hatching some chicks with your family at home. You get to document how many days, like if you've got an incubator, you know, how many days are in the incubation and then what it's like afterwards. That's a science experiment, as well as producing food for your family. Like hopefully you get a lot of females and you can get eggs. So there's a whole bunch of ways that you can create this environment where you're learning and engaging together as a family, but also creating some useful things for your home. I know Anita's family are learning to milk cows and have lots of fun with doing all of that sort of stuff. How does a cow work and how do we actually keep fences up? And, you know, that's all learning skills.
Yep. A lot of our work lately has been learning skills, and I've been having to learn them alongside my kids, and problem solving has had to be one of the things that we've been working on, and where to find the information that we need to learn the concepts that we have to learn. I have been working with my 13-year-old to work out electric fences to keep our cows in the right places, and so that they don't get in and eat my veggie patch, which they have done. And then because we'd been working on electric fences and we had to earth our electric fence onto a metal stake that was buried deep in the ground to make sure that we could give a good electric shock if the cows touched the fence. We then watched a couple of YouTube videos about how that same concept of earthing works in a house when you're trying not to give an electric shock, but you're trying to provide current and voltage to power your appliances. So yeah, that's been, you know, we've taken one particular aspect of what needed to be done in our lives and we've just spun off that to add all sorts of skills and learning and theory on top of that.
Yeah, and that's the same for our family in regards to prior to the coronavirus. We were packing up, getting ready to travel Australia, and we brought a solar power setup. And so, you know, my children have been learning about how to set the solar panel up and how to, all the different parts that have to go into all the different areas so that they can, you know, make it all work so that there will be energy for the devices that they want to use and all of that sort of stuff. So all the things that you do in your life could in some way probably be turned into some form of education. Even the way you make your coffee.
Yes.
You could turn that into some education. You could teach your kids to be barristers.
Yeah.
Baristas, sorry. Baristas. They could be barristers as well, but baristas.
I'm not sure Heather I could teach them to be barristers.
I could argue just about anything. Heather is saying, I find being in the school system frustrating, and I really, really feel for you. And I know that some people are not actually able to step outside of the school system. For those of you who can and think it might be a good idea, now might be the perfect time to start to think about whether that would realistically be something worthwhile you pursuing. And Ben and Kerry are telling you to buy a goat. You've already got 2 goats. They're
I
just not at
do.
your
I
house
already,
right now.
yep, I do have 2 goats, and come winter, we will get them bred, and I will have them back here producing milk, and we'll have milk coming out our ears. That's the plan.
That will be interesting to see. All right. If anybody has anybody got any last final questions before we start saying good night to you all? We've been on here for like 2 hours. Can you believe it, Anita?
No,
We could probably talk for another 2 hours easily.
we could.
But if anybody wants to, I know that Anita offers a sort of homeschool coaching sort of package, so you can always contact her and ask if you want any more support in that area. I don't offer anything. I'm just saying hi and let's do this together, people. You can message me if you really need to, but if it's going to be really complicated, I might tag team Anita in. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. It's been an amazing night to have some conversations, and I get to talk with my bestie over things that we love and answer some questions for you guys. Yeah. If nobody's got any other questions, we will say good night, adieu, and yeah, feel free to keep putting, like, this is live on Facebook, so you can always come and, you know, ask any more questions on Facebook. It will go onto YouTube, so you can always ask over there as well. Yeah, otherwise, contact Anita, message me if you need to, and we will say good night to you all. Good night.
Bye.